Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
8:06 on this Tuesday morning. If you missed any of our first 3 hours, that's fine. You can just subscribe to our podcast and download it so you don't miss anything. It's a great way to start your day and get your way through the middle of your day if you need to catch up on anything during lunch. In 30 minutes, we're going to speak with Nell Gardner Heritage Foundation about the terrifying infringements on free speech and free expression in the UK. That's coming up. I'm Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
What really happened at Abbey Gate, and who's responsible, and who should be held accountable? That's the simple question that Jerry Dunleavy was asking when he co-authored the book Kabul, which ended up being a sensation. It ended up opening up a whole lot of new avenues of investigation into the disastrous withdrawal of Afghanistan, overseen by Mark Milley and Lloyd Austin and, of course, Joe Biden. And Jerry Dunleavy joins us now because he has just resigned his position as senior investigator of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And Jerry, first of all, thanks for joining us. It's great to talk with you.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate being here.
Jerry, I interviewed you. I feel like it was the week you got this assignment. You were kind of excited about it, and this was really going to be a way where you could utilize your great investigative skills and your wealth of knowledge that you built while writing the book to really get to the bottom of this and finally get some peace and justice for those Gold Star families. And I got to tell you how distressing it is to read your resignation letter yesterday, knowing that all of that hope and optimism that you had is now sort of flushed down the toilet. And I would love for you to sort of reveal for us, if you can summarize it, what happened here? Is this a deep state thing? Is this a lack of courage? Is this just sadly the way Washington works? How would you summarize this very disappointing end to this investigation?
Yeah. Well, look, some of this is just how Washington works, and some of it is a lack of courage. But, you know, Chairman McCall and the committee made very specific promises to the Abbey Gate Gold Star families that no stone would be left unturned, and that everything possible would be done to get answers for them. And those promises have not just not been fulfilled, but there hasn't been a serious effort to even attempt to fulfill those promises. I think that part of it here is just a desire not to allow any real blame to fall on the shoulders of military commanders and generals. That has definitely been a constant and unfortunate theme working on the committee. The tough questions that I've said we need to pose to CENTCOM and to CENTCOM's investigators. CENTCOM investigated, if you want to call it that, the Abbey Gate attack, and there are a lot of things that don't make sense about what they concluded, and our committee failed to press them properly. There are military commanders who were on the ground in Afghanistan during the evacuation: General Donahue, General Sullivan, Admiral Vaisley, who I have been saying for essentially a year now since joining the committee. These are guys that we need to talk to. They know about the U.S. reliance on the Taliban to provide security during the evacuation. They know about the threats being posed by ISIS-K to the Marines at HKIA at that time. I've been saying we need to bring these guys in, sit them down for transcribed interviews, and just learn what they know. The committee has failed to even formally ask them to come in, let alone interview them or ask them any tough questions. And even when we brought in General Milley and General McKenzie for a public hearing, we treated them with kid gloves. There was sort of, I think, messaging from the top down, from Chairman McCall down, that these generals aren't really at fault. They didn't really do very much, if anything, wrong. And we even changed the hearing name for General Milley and General McKenzie after we had announced it. After Milley complained about the hearing name seeming like, hey, this hearing name seems like maybe I may have done something wrong, Chairman McCall then changed the hearing name to make it more favorable to General Milley. So that just kind of gives sense of how we were treating these folks. Now, that's not to say that the military was like worse at handling this in 2021 than the State Department or worse than the White House, because I think ultimately the fault lies with President Biden, his decision, him being backed by people like Vice President Harris. The State Department screwed this up as badly as you can screw things up. Military leaders said, don't do a full, withdrawal, and they were right about that. But everything that happened after that, the military also made huge mistakes, failed to understand what was going on, failed to understand the Taliban enemy, failed to understand the dynamics with the Afghan military, and they were caught as flat-footed pretty much as anyone else. And so there's accountability that needs to be spread around here if we want to learn the lessons we need to learn, if we want to get answers for the Abbey Gate Gold Star families, and if we want to make sure that there's not future unnecessary Gold Star families. And the committee has failed to even really attempt to get those answers and accountability on some of these aspects, especially the aspects related to the military.
Jerry, in your resignation letter, you say, yet my efforts to fully pursue investigative leads have been repeatedly stymied by our chief investigator and by senior staff, and unfortunately sometimes by indecision from you, Mr. Chairman. Has Chairman McCall responded to this? Any statement or anything he said to you that you're willing to share?
Chairman McCall has not spoken with me or reached out to me since the resignation letter. I, of course, would absolutely welcome that, because my goal here, there's a few goals that I have here. One, I think that the Abbey Gate Gold Star families needed to know what the state of play was, needed to know that the committee was not following through on its promises to them. These are promises that the chairman has made publicly and privately to them. We also, I believe that after a year of doing this internally, pushing for this internally, it just wasn't working. And so the American public needed to know too, and there needed to be some public pressure here to get them to do the right thing, because it's not too late to at least begin to do the right thing, to begin to get the ball rolling. There has been an incredible amount of wasted time that you're never going to get back.
Yeah.
But the committee still can at least get the ball rolling on these things, and set things up for maybe a more serious investigation to continue in the future. And that's my hope.
Jerry, I spent some time on Capitol Hill and I worked on a committee, and I have to say that you are known as such an expert on this issue. And this is more of a statement. I'm going to pass it over to Larry. I'm really shocked that the chairman has not, you have not talked to him. You have not had, he has not reached out to you. I know this just happened yesterday, but it really is shocking to me that he has not spoken to you about this. Larry, I want to pass
Jerry,
it over to you.
Here's what I'm not understanding. My understanding of the narrative after reading your book, and obviously the mistakes made, sadly, to say mistakes were made is such an understatement considering the loss of life here and the tragedy that was involved. But it seems like, and from the initial hearings that you were able to conduct, it seemed like there was solid military advice going in. It was overruled by the civilians. It's a classic story of not letting the generals actually do what they do best, and having civilians in the State Department and the White House overstepping and overruling them and then creating a disaster. Who are they protecting here? It's not like they're protecting their friends in the military and their partners over at the Pentagon. Yes, I understand some military people probably went along and they played politics and they didn't step up and say anything. But ultimately, the target here needs to be the civilian oversight in the State Department and the White House, it appears. Tell me if I'm wrong about that. So where's the reluctance to go after them?
It's befuddling. And what I will say is that, the military leadership told President Biden, if you do a rapid and total withdrawal from Afghanistan, it will be a disaster. That is not the right path to take.
You know what, Jerry, hold your thought. This is too important, and I don't want to rush this. Do you mind just giving me 45 seconds for a quick traffic check, and then we'll continue that thought?
Of course.
Do you mind? All right, we're going to continue on this with Jerry Dunleavy and what's going on now, if anything, with this investigation into Abbeygate and the Biden-Harris disaster in Afghanistan. First, though, it's 8:15. Let's get straight to it. It was just over a year ago when our guest Jerry Dunleavy, along with his co-author James Hassan, had the national bestseller Kabul hit the stands. It was endorsed, by the way, by Senator Tom Cotton and Congressman Michael Waltz. And that book spurred greater investigation into the disastrous withdrawal of Afghanistan under the Biden administration and the Blinken State Department. And it was so effective, Jerry, that you were brought in as one of the senior investigators into the House Armed Services Committee. Armed Services? Or
House
Foreign Affairs, Foreign Affairs Committee. I heard Michael Waltz's name and I immediately thought Armed Services. And now we're talking to Jerry Dunleavy because a year later he is stepping down from that position. Yeah, I interrupted you. You were talking about how the generals, the military had warned of the precipitous withdrawal and what might happen. And then I had to cut you off. So continue on that stream of thought there because, again, my questioning here is this was ultimately, it was the civilians who made this decision. And I remember from reading your book and interviewing you at the time about this, Jerry, that it was very much a heavy-handed State Department intrusion into military affairs that ended up being a big part of the security problem that led to Abbeygate. But please correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, no, you're right, but it's also a little bit more complicated. So, it's President Biden's decision to go to zero. That was a disaster. Military, generals and top military leadership did warn that would be a disaster. However, and they were right about that warning. However, while the State Department completely failed in every possible way that you can, which absolutely put us on that path to chaos, deadly chaos in August 2021, the top of the military leadership also failed in their own ways. General Milley in the summer of 2021 apparently, in testimony to Congress, demonstrated that he had no idea how many districts the Taliban was in charge of in the middle of their offensive taking over Afghanistan. He was way behind on how widespread the Taliban's advances were. General Milley said that the Afghan military and police totaled 325,000 to 350,000 strong in the summer of 2021. They were never that large. And by the summer of 2021, they were collapsing under the Taliban onslaught and because the U.S. had pulled all of our support, logistics, air support advisors that they relied upon. So General Milley demonstrated in the summer of 2021 that while his military advice about keeping U.S. troops there was absolutely accurate, he also failed to understand the military dynamics of what was happening in Afghanistan. And then with General McKenzie on August 15th, 2021, just as one example, he met with the Taliban in Doha as the Taliban was on the precipice of taking Kabul that day. And the Taliban actually offered to allow the United States military to pour into Kabul and to secure Kabul ourselves to conduct our evacuation. And General McKenzie rejected that on the spot. So we then were relying on the Taliban because then the Taliban took over all of Kabul. We were relying on the Taliban to provide security. And these other military leaders I mentioned, Donahue, Vasley, Sullivan, were our top guys on the ground who can speak to the deals that we cut with the Taliban. They can speak to the fact that, and this is something we uncovered in our book, that the U.S. would ask the Taliban to search or raid ISIS-K locations around Kabul, and the Taliban would sometimes refuse, would just say no. Why did the Taliban do that? What was our response to that? How can you how can you rely on a group to provide security for you when they won't take care of ISIS-K?
Yeah.
And as we know, the Taliban freed thousands of prisoners from Bagram, which we had abandoned. And one of those prisoners was an ISIS-K prisoner who went on just a week or so later to carry out the Abbeygate bombings. So these are the tough questions that I have been saying we need to ask, we need to get answers on, and everybody here needs to get held accountable. But so many of these questions haven't even been posed, and so many military leaders, these military commanders on the ground during the NEO, we never even bothered to ask them to come in for transcribed interviews, let alone ask them these tough questions.
So if Congress, through oversight, is incapable of doing this, Jerry, does this just take a complete and total, turning the Pentagon inside out? You need a new administration to come in here and say, we're going to reform this place from top to bottom. What's the solution here?
Yeah. Well, look, Congress isn't incapable of doing this. They're unwilling to do it because as a reporter, as an outside investigator, as a journalist, you can ask any question that you want to anybody that you want. They don't have to respond to you. They don't have to give you honest answers if they do respond to you. Congress has incredible powers. They can compel the production of documents. They can compel.
Yes. When they're motivated, they sure can.
Absolutely. They can subpoena people. And if people lie to them, it is a crime. Okay? So there are real powers that we have here that Congress can and should exercise to bring in all of the people that we should have brought in, all of the State Department witnesses we should have brought in, all of the Defense Department witnesses we should have brought in, all of the other witnesses that we should have brought in, all of the other documents that we should be seeking, and all of the other questions we should be asking. These are things that Congress has within its power not to just ask, but to compel truthful answers on. And that's what's so frustrating about this year on the committee is oftentimes an unwillingness on the part of Chairman McCall to exercise his perch, to exercise the incredible power that he has when he's holding the gavel as a chairman of a powerful committee. And that is, it's what we need in Washington, D.C. We need oversight that's real and that makes use of its full powers to hold other elements of the federal government accountable when they screw up. Because, Abbey Gate was horrible, and these Gold Star families, this was unnecessary. The next war that we find ourselves in with a great power, it's going to be even worse.
This sounds like the genesis of a political campaign. Where do you live? What's your district? I'm here for you.
Unfortunately, I live in Washington, D.C. right now.
Time to move.
That's it. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, we do have a lot of veterans who are running for office that we interview on a regular basis, and we're going to add this to the list of questions about whether they would reopen this and get serious about this investigation. It's outrageous. And, Jerry, I've always admired your work. You know that. We've worked together tangentially over the years, and I'll reiterate how disheartening it is to hear, knowing that you approach this with such hope, such promise, and the ability to actually, in a Mr. Smith goes to Washington kind of way, to really do something good and constructive, and to see it end like this. Let's not let this be the end. This is just a stanza in the middle of a longer process, but we're going to get to this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Larry, for that. And yeah, this is not the end. That's what I told the Abbey Gate Gold Star families when I talked to them and kind of previewed that I'd be making this public. It's not the end. The committee can still at least start to do the right thing, but it's not the end. It's something that I'm going to continue to.
Thank you for that, Jerry. Appreciate it. And if you want to support what Jerry does, buy the book, Kabul. If you didn't already get it, you should get it now. And, of course, we'd love to have Chairman McCall. He's been on the program before. We've spoken to him before. We'd love to have him on to give his response to this and explain his side of this story. 8:26 now. Let's get straight to Jamie Whitten, City Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.